Glad that we can be here this beautiful first day of the week. I see the Patriotics are out and wearing their red, white, and blue, and I'm thankful for that. It is a great time to remember who we are and from what we have in this country and the blessings that we have. Linda and I were talking a minute ago about being blessed. And my first three greatest blessings are to be a Christian, to be married to her, and to have beautiful children. And then the grandchildren behind that, and then everything else follows in its place.
A good-looking son-in-law.
Whoa! Yeah.
Yes.
We need to pray for all of us. All right. Well, there went my sentimentality with that. Anyway, if you'll turn with me to number 276. I don't know if it's good to have you back or not. 276. Jesus is all the world to me. We'll sing the first and fourth verses of this song, and then we will go to our classes as soon as Ernie takes care of it.
Clicker good.
You put it down.
Is that it right there?
There it is.
You're hiding it.
Okay, 276. Jesus is all the world to me, my life, my joy, my all. He is my strength from day to day. Without him I would fall. When I am sad, to him I go. No other one can cheer me so. When I am sad, he makes me glad. He's my friend. Jesus is all the world to me. I want no better friend. I trust him now. I'll trust him when life's fleeting days shall end. Beautiful life with such a friend. Beautiful life that has no end. Eternal life, eternal joy. He's my friend. You may go to your classes. I almost sat down. This is unusual. Been here, a year and a half now, almost 2 years?
2 years.
2 years. And I haven't taught on a Sunday morning with Ernie here. This is the first break he's gotten on a Sunday morning. So I don't know whether that's good or bad. But we certainly are thankful that they are home and safe and sound. And we are appreciative of all that they do. Oh, you're gonna handle the clicker for me?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
When we think about this idea of commitment, you can look at all the different words up there and talk about each of them. And we've talked about the idea of commitment being almost the same as being faithful or faithfulness, making a vow. And that's what we want to recognize and to understand. I have three quotes from different people. Well, two of them are from the same individual that I wanted to just let you think about. Now, these are mere men saying these things. There's nothing that is inspired of God by these men. These are just thoughts of theirs. But it says, the first one is by Alexander McLaren. He says, faith does not grasp a doctrine, but a heart. The trust which Christ requires is the bond that unites souls with him. And the very life of it is entire committal of myself to Him in all my relations and for all my needs, and absolute utter confidence in Him as sufficient for everything that I can require. A gentleman by the name of Rick Warren made these two comments. Nothing shapes your life more than the commitments you choose to make. And then he also says, your commitments can develop you or destroy you, but either way, they will define you. So we need to recognize that commitment is something that affects our lives, whatever it is that we commit ourselves to. And we've talked quite a bit about different thoughts, and I want to get us down to question number 9, because that's where we are. 7, 8, and 9. There we go. We got quite a bit discussed Wednesday night about can we think of Jesus without thinking about commitment. We recognize that Jesus was totally committed to the serving of His Father. It's interesting that at one point it declares that Jesus turned His face towards Jerusalem. He said, this is where I've got to go, knowing what He was going to face. So we look at Jesus and His commitment. We look at the disciples and their commitment. But we also need to look at our commitment, because it is our commitment, our faithfulness, that's going to get us to God or not. So here's the question I want us to think about. And it's really, all these questions, well, almost all of them have been rhetorical. But I really appreciate you speaking out and talking about it. And let's continue that this morning. And here's the idea. Have we avoided commitment as individuals or as the church? Have we avoided commitment? Is there things in the world that people have asked you to commit to, and you said, no, I'm not going to do that? Bill?
I get weekly invitation, not weekly. Yeah, the answer is yes. But when you examine your commitment, if most everybody's like me, if your plate's full and it's only going to pile up higher, so you either got to get stuff off your plate or figure it out. So yeah, these commitments you got to evaluate it now. Look, time is my biggest enemy now, not friend.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think the word promise is also an idea of commitment. I know a young lady that one time I said to her, I want you to promise me this. She said, I can't do that because I don't know whether I can keep that promise or not. So we have to think about that. In this room, we think about the idea of baptism and being committed to Christ. Someone read Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. It's a very familiar passage to all of us, so if you will read that, I appreciate it.
I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercy of God, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God.
Here's Paul talking to us. Thank you, Ernie, for that. He said, I beseech you, I beg of you, I ask of you, I want you to think about this, to present your bodies a living sacrifice. Now, we've talked, I think Ernie's talked about this before, the idea of the living sacrifice. How long are we supposed to be sacrificing ourselves to God?
Forever.
Forever. As long as we're alive. As long as we're living, we are to be committed to God as children of His. we commit our lives when we're baptized. And so we understand that and want, or we should, and we want to try to follow it. Now, the thought I want us to think about here is, what does this commitment mean? What does it mean to be committed to Christ?
When I think commitment, I think of what we see it as making that covenant. You know, that covenant with God, with Jesus. And we think back like to those Jews of the Old Testament, when they made that covenant, the blood that was shed for that covenant, showing that it would be forever. And that what had to happen in life, you know, basically given. And it shows the importance, basically, of what that means. And that's, when I see that about, you know, the commitment, what it is just knowing that for Christ is that it's a, like you said, it's an everlasting commitment. It doesn't stop, and nothing comes before it. We always put it first. And Jesus put us first by dying. You know, put his Father first, but put us next to that, of course, by dying on the cross for us. And that's, if we think about it like that, what he did for us, there's no reason why we wouldn't want to continue our commitment.
That commitment, yeah, is that covenant that we make with God. And it is an everlasting, but what is within that covenant? That's a broad umbrella. What's in it that we need to think about, Kalita?
The word that jumped out to me in the verse 1 is sacrifice. In the Old Testament, they had to do a physical sacrifice. We're not having to do that kind of sacrificing at this point. But as Christians, there are things that we would really like to do, and we sacrifice that if we are committed to Jesus, to God, that we understand that if we do that, we are either, our example is not there, or it causes us to sin, or someone else to sin. So it can be has to be to become a Christian, we have to make sacrifices.
Okay. Yeah, Brother Spider.
God wants the best for us as being his children, but he wants us to obey him. He wants us to put aside our energy and resources, you know, and to follow him and obey him so that he can take care of us.
Okay, absolutely. Most of us probably know what John 14:15 says. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Isn't that part of being committed? We talked in somewhat in generalities, and we've mentioned one specific about the covenant and obedience to that and being a sacrifice. But as individuals and as the church, are we, and we say we love the Lord, or we love him enough that we put him on in baptism, then we need to keep his commandments, don't we? I mean, that's that. And whatever he says to do, we're supposed to be doing it. Aren't we? Ernie, are you going to say something?
Yes, it's kind of like sometimes I think some people, you know, it's just like a promise or commitment you make somebody today. You know, we make a commitment and then say, like we said, something else comes up in its way, but we still have a choice. Do we keep the commitment or we do the other thing?
Absolutely. And
I think it's like we read with what Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 2, when he's talking about Jesus, beginning verse 21, he says, "For to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth, who when he was reviled, did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously." Even when he was suffering, and I think a lot of people when they suffer, they forget about that commitment, where to turn to. And they may turn to God and get me out of this, but if it doesn't happen immediately, God, what's going on here, God? Jesus said it didn't matter what he was going through. He committed himself to that one the judge is righteously talking about God. And that's what we have to look at is, you know, there's a judgment that comes along with commitment. And God's going to do that righteously, but the question is, are we going to continue to try to be righteous?
Absolutely.
And that's what we see.
Now, how strong is your commitment? Will it weather the storm? Will it weather adversity? Or do we give up at that point and say, God, you're not taking care of me? That's a sad thought, you know, that we find that. But of course, as we said, or as Ernie was reading there, Jesus totally committed himself to God. And who knows, the way the world is going, we may find ourselves having our commitment tested. We don't know. We just have to take one day at a time and pray about it. And that's part of what we'll get to. One of the questions that we have, prayer is an answer to what we need. Someone read Mark 12 and verse 30. Mark 12 and verse 30. The Lord is speaking here in this chapter and in this verse number 30.
And thou shalt love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment.
Does that show only half-hearted commitment?
Say
No.
all.
That's his all. That's
It
right.
takes all. Is there any such thing as half, or can you be half-hearted committed to something?
Can, but I mean, it's not
It
going to
doesn't
work.
mean
It's
good.
not going to work, yeah.
It's like the passage that we have in Revelation that says, you know, you're neither hot nor cold, basically, and lukewarmness is going to get you spewed out of his mouth. So we have to either give our all or you walk away. And sometimes the devil wants to fool us, making us think that we are totally committed. But when things come up, sometimes we wonder where are we divided?
Yeah, with this verse, it's interesting, of course, we've probably said it 1,000 times, but notice it doesn't leave out any part of our being. I mean, every part of, even our own soul, you know, that's from God, but our strength, everything's involved in it. So he
Everything.
can't give you even 3/4 or 90%, he wants every 100%.
That's absolutely right. It's total. Bill.
And the context of that verse was in response to a scribe, a righteous, some may say self-righteous, answer. And, you know, the scribe gave him a kind of a discreet answer back, kind of cutesy answer back.
Yeah.
But this was a profound declaration to the scribe, who, by the way, who could argue? I mean, how many times have you not thought, against such there is no law? There was nothing Jesus ever said. That no government, even the most dictatorship, communist government, has ever created laws against the principles that Jesus spoke about.
Yeah.
Love, kindness, and understanding, following.
And there are, you know, we need to go through, as we go through our lives in our faith, and we need to stop and think about things like these. The devil wants you to not think about it, and we need to do that. So we've talked about keeping his commandments, giving our all. In Colossians 3:15 through 17, if someone would read those verses, Ernie, I may think on Wednesday night too, I don't know. We'll see. Look at Colossians 3:15 through 17. This is Paul, of course, writing to us, to the church of Colossae, but it also is for us today. Someone read Colossians 3:15 through 17.
And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which ye also were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him.
We are to be, or we're to let the word dwell in us. How? Richly. This is a point that we need to grab. How do we do that? How do we let the word dwell in us richly? Through study, through listening to sermons, through listening to Bible classes and thinking on those things and participating in those things, that we grow inside. You know, when you're learning a job, you read the books, you study the books, and you go back. Oh yeah, I remember that. Now, how you let things dwell in you. I look at Google on something, and I remember what I looked at Google, and then I do it here. And so that is an important point for us, that we let that happen through everything we do as Christians. In psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, we edify, we strengthen, we encourage one another. Kalina?
The richly, I was thinking of what makes something rich, added to. When you're baking, you add the oil or butter or cream, things to make it richer. If it's the soil, you add nutrients to the soil to make the ground richer. So with ourselves, we need to add the fruits of the Spirit, the Christian graces, and we can only do that by study, hearing.
And there's an important point in those things. We can't be just individuals that learn. These things require action on the part of us as Christians. We have to put those things into practice in our lives. Just knowing it is not going to work. So we work on this. This is part of what it means to be committed to Christ. And I want us to, I keep stressing that point. I want us to remember that the things we're talking about is about being committed to Christ. Ernie, you look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, that verse, it said, let the word of Christ flow in you richly. If we just left it at that, there's a lot we could add to it, but I don't think how it says, in all wisdom. So it's, it's just like we brought up about cooking. Something, there's ladies I know in the congregation that have a cake or whatever it is, they can make it from their mind. I mean, they don't even have to look at the recipe because they've had wisdom in it. They've done it so many times and they've continued it. And where someone doing it for the first, maybe third, fourth, fifth time, sixth time, they're still looking at the recipe, how to figure it out.
Right.
And that's where I believe, like Latin ago, we were talking about the scribe. It was interesting, Jesus said with all your mind, and he said he replaced that with all your understanding. He knew what that meant, the mind, and that's what today, it's one thing to have knowledge. Understanding is totally different. Understanding is recognizing what you do with that knowledge.
Yes.
And that's where that wisdom is we see.
And what's interesting, just saying, I'll get to you there. What's interesting is when you think about that, when you have the knowledge of something, maybe it's working on a car, maybe it's carpentry work, maybe it's bookkeeping or whatever, a lot of times you don't have to look it up again. You know it and you react to it. That's the point that we need to be at in our Christian life. That when the Word is within us, when we've studied it, we don't have to necessarily go back to it to know what we need to do. We don't run home. Well, there's a bar over here. What do I do? There's whatever it is, whatever you might think is sin. How do I find it? You know what the Scriptures say. And that's part of being committed. Doug?
Well, also, further into that verse, it says, teaching and admonishing one another And admonishing would be to correct somebody when they were wrong or to make sure that they had it right. So that when they were teaching, they wanted to make sure that everybody understood that, you know, that everybody was on the same page.
Yes. And that's where we need to be as individuals, but then collectively as Christians. We talk about this idea of commitment and what does it take to be committed. What does it, in our lives, what do we do? Another verse that we think about is 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. There, Paul says in chapter 3, verses 16 and 17, all scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect or complete, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. Part of being committed to God is to study, to make ourselves approved of God. It's always nice when you say, when you were in school, it probably happened to me more often than I think, but you study something and you raise your hand and you answer in class and the teacher says you're right. You've been substantiated that your study has been approved of God. You've made a commitment to the teacher, to the class, to do the best that you can do. Because remember, we talked about this Wednesday night. There's not one of us in here that are perfect. Sometimes our commitment isn't as strong as it should be, but nonetheless, we strive to make it the best that we can.
It's, like what you just said, and it's so important because it goes along with worship and class, is, it's like in school, and I remember in high school, I thought, I just sit in the class, I'll learn. And it doesn't work that way. I mean, it's kind of like church, services and class coming together as a church, and a lot of people think, well, if I'm just there for that, for class, if I'm there for services, which is great, we need to be doing that. But if that's it, you're not going to remember it, you're not going to learn it all, and that's where that study comes in on our own. And it doesn't have to be, like hours and hours of study. I mean, we put it in there and we take our time daily reading God's Word, just being a part of it, and it will be committed. And that's that part of where I think about a minute ago where you said about having the same thought, same idea, is unity. If we want to have unity with God, we have to know what He wants.
Yes.
And we have to understand that by doing that. Or else we won't. You really can't say you're committed if you don't have unity with Him. There's no way.
Yep. And going to the idea of reading your Bible daily, this lady over here listens audio every day and listens for, I don't know exactly how long, but listens to someone reading the Bible, and she's there as she's listening, is thinking on those things. And that's a way to put the Word into you too. I mean, there's so much technology as far as that goes. Brother Spivey.
We have to pray to God for the wisdom to apply these things to our life that we read. That's one aspect of it, is reading and having the knowledge.
Absolutely.
But we need wisdom. We need wisdom to apply these things to our life and live them out each day before people.
Yeah, and it's the same idea. We're going to get over there if they're going to let me get back in here Wednesday night, because I think we're almost through. We have about, what, 6 minutes? How much? 6 minutes. And so, I was going where that thought, we have to be, as James says, doers of the word and not hearers only. Bill.
Followed up with Brother Bobby, said, study should lead to commitment, but for me, it just seems to lead to simplicity. It just becomes less and less and less complicated, no mystery. It just leads to a simplicity. The gospel, very simply understood. Study makes it simple.
Absolutely. When you have that study, it is adding to and strengthening that commitment / faithfulness to God. And we certainly need to do that. I'm going to try to do one more, John 13.
I guess just real quick.
Sure.
It's like Brother Spike said, and Bill, you know, I think when you think of commitment, simplicity, that's kind of the action in it that you're getting. But the wisdom, you know, a lot of people think you get wisdom by reading. And he's exactly like Brother Spike said. That Bible doesn't say that. It says the only way to get wisdom is through prayer. And, you know, we got to ask God for wisdom. And he gives that. At the same time, we go, I'm just going to ask him for wisdom, so I don't have to read the Bible.
Right.
I mean,
right,
that ain't
right.
going to happen, you know. And that's where we put all those together and we
Yeah.
see that how, I mean, imagine he didn't give us this.
Yeah.
Whatever we got wisdom in, whatever we want.
Right.
And, you know, whatever we think is right. And
That
so we
is-
see that.
That's good. Bill, I'll let you have that, and I'm going to put David Stafford on display for us. Go ahead.
By the way, while nothing feels better than to enter a test in school, know you know it, and just can't wait to deliver the answer. One of my
Absolutely.
recurring nightmares in life was to enter a classroom and it's test day and I'm not prepared.
Yeah.
I mean, you know that recurring nightmare of, wait a minute, what? We got a test today? I don't, that was always a nightmare for me.
Yes, yes,
But the, you know, the good part is when you are prepared, and you know
Yes.
you're prepared.
yes.
Can't wait to deliver the information. And our faith is that way, isn't it? We can't wait to deliver the gospel.
Yeah.
And
Let me give you an example, and then I think we'll have to stop there. We, at David and Nikki's, we've been remodeling their kitchen and dining room. Well, last week we got the backsplash, the tile put up, and looked really nice. And then we had to go back and put the grout in. So I told David, David's never done it before. I said, David, I want you to watch some videos on how to put the grout in, how you do everything. So he read it, or listened to it, and he told me, yeah, these are the steps you go through. I said, okay. I did a little section for him, showed him how to do that, and I said, okay, here you go, the rest of it's yours. He had about 8 feet one way, about 4 feet the other way. So about 12 foot and about 18, 19 inches high to do. Well, he read everything, he explained it, exactly perfect. I handed the trowel to do it with. He picks it up and he dips the one corner into the grout and goes up to the tile, and he's trying to put it in each tile by itself. But by the time we got about 2 feet in, I let him struggle for a while. And then I said, okay, David, let's go back. Remember the video. You take your trowel, you scoop it up, you slap it on, and you just start rubbing it in. And so he finally got the hang of it. He finally got it. I mean, that's taking that knowledge, trying to remember it, and working with it. And by the end, he was doing pretty good with it. So that's the point as far as being a Christian and studying the Word. You've got to apply it. You've got to work it into your life and gain that wisdom that you need. All right, guys, hand up.
My mom said something online.
Okay.
She said commitment is important for us to act also on the outside of worship service. People will see our commitments to God at our jobs and play, whatever we may be doing. And that's true, you know, the commitment comes from.
Yeah.
From people will see it. They'll see whether we're committed or not. They'll know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bill?
Yeah, that was really a terrific example, because I was thinking that we read the Word, but sometimes when we apply it, we may break some glass. You know, when you're trying to learn something, it's like in my meetings with people, I can you know, tell them how to try a case, and I say, now go try a case. I mean, they can read about it all they want to, but until you get in there and apply your faith, in interaction with people,
Yep.
and learning when to keep your mouth shut and not say something you ought not say, and when to be complimentary, or when to, I mean, that's a great example of David.
Yeah. I mean, I love that to death, but, you know, it's when you don't have that knowledge, when you don't have that experience, it's hard. But once you gain it, once you've done it enough, man, you don't have to look at anything. You can just go up there and you do what you need to do. And that's the important point of keeping the Word of God close to your heart. and then applying it, being doer of it. We'll stop there. Oh,
I'm
Ernie,
saying,
sorry.
you know, we can't be afraid either to make a mistake. You know, that's when we learn from that, like, he was making a mistake doing that. And it's same with our walk in God. God knows that we're not perfect. He knows we're gonna sin sometimes, we fix it. That's why he gives that opportunity to come back to him. And I've seen people that were so worried that they couldn't follow Christ right, that they completely decided not to.
Absolutely.
And we can never do
That is a point well made. On David again, he called me last night. He said, you know, I had enough painter's caulk left that I was able to caulk the bottom of the tile that meets the countertop. I said, David, that's the wrong caulk. I said, it's the wrong caulk to use. I said, you need to use a silicone caulk, not that painter's caulk, because it won't work. He went, oh, okay. I said, just take it. It's still pliable enough. Get it wet, get it out of there, and then we'll put silicone in.
But look, there's another example, another great example. You see how you're patient with someone who doesn't know. You didn't just say, oh, what kind of a, you know, you were patient with it. You said, well,
Yeah.
that's not gonna happen, you know? But,
Yeah.
But you didn't, you know, your patience kicked in, because you knew you did know. We face that with young Christians.
Yep.
We see them do things and say things, we go,
Absolutely. We have to be patient with brethren.
Yeah.
that
We
are-
have
that
a
are young in
long-suffering
faith.
God, you know, long-suffering God.
That's
The Bible tells us. And a lot of times Christians aren't near as long-suffering as God is, and we need to be.
Absolutely.
Right.
All right. Thank you for your comments this morning and your patience and your commitment.
I appreciate your comments.